great to be here. It's always good to be with the community. And I'm very happy to be with Yasmien today to discuss this topic. And so we'll start with our introduction. I'll turn it over to Yasmien.
Yeah, welcome everybody. We are very excited to be here addressing all of you. I am also excited to be with Ian. He's definitely one of the best people to present with. No pressure, Ian. So we kind of already had an introduction, but my name's Yasmien Fadl. I'm an interior designer, and I currently head up workplace design and experience for one of Canada's top financial institutions. Ian's also, maybe Ian, you can jump in and give a bit of an intro, and then I'll just kind of talk about what our core focus is for this particular session, how we want to go about it.
Sure. And as mentioned, I'm a design equity consultant, among other things, but I'm really focused on trying to help leaders within our industry and those connected to the industry design better and to build better structures that really establish meaningful approaches to equity.
Yeah, and because we are extremely passionate about this particular topic, and specifically about equity in the workplace. So what we've done is we've prepared this session with we've kind of tried to wear a lot of different hats. So it's got a bit of an owner mindset, a contributor mindset, an industry mindset, and we're going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but specifically in the workplace. So what we want you to come out of this session with is a very clear understanding on, number one, the tangible benefits of inclusion, but also with some maybe a roadmap with some actions for you or your individual business. And we really want to encourage you to ask a lot of questions along the way. We're going to leave some time at the very end to try to address as many of them as we can, and just keep the dialogue going. We want to make sure that everyone that's attending this session, please, come in with an open heart, and also figure out what your role or what you can do in terms of, coming out of this session with some concrete actions that you can take part in.
That's great.
Yeah. So with that, we can move into telling you what we're going to discuss today. So why does this work matter anyway, right? We want to kind of talk about that and try to ground our understanding and make sure that we're speaking the same language and that we have, again, this common understanding of the challenge and the opportunity. And then also, localize it a little bit. So talk about what's in it for you, right? Focus on the benefits, the value proposition, the business side, the personal side. And we'll also talk about exclusion, right? What are the risks? The risks to our industry, the risks to our business, personal risks, right? And then Ian's going to take it home with the roadmap, right? Where do you start and what you can aim from? And having worked with Ian for quite a few years, I can tell you that his roadmaps are very concrete. So you're going to hopefully walk away with some very clear, action items, right? So, Ian, I don't know if there's anything else. I think that covers pretty much all of it. We can probably dive into the presentation.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. So we'll start with why this work matters. So I'm going to talk, Ian, I think you're going to talk a little bit about the social benefits, and then I can pick up on business.
Sure. And we can go to the next slide. And we really want to just sort of set a foundational understanding of why the conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion are so important and what it translates into. And really, it sort of comes back to, again, our sense of humanity and what really makes for a strong sense of belonging. And this sort of community approach to sort of cohesion, which we know has a direct impact on how we interact, not only with our clients, but also with our employees, our staff, our leaders at our firms, and our collaborators that we're working with. And really this undergirds this idea of better. There are better social benefits when a group of people feel like they belong, like they're working cohesively together to produce a favorable outcome. So that's one of the main benefits of why this work matters.
Yeah, 100%. And that social fabric just becomes stronger, right? And I think we wanted to also note that, we've seen a lot, there's a lot of news, and we've seen a lot of unrest in the last decade. And I'd say, especially since a lot of us have been home over the pandemic, we've also seen some of that kind of exacerbated. And you can, in terms of social justice issues. And I think on the business side, we've also seen a bit of an acceleration towards progress, but also kind of outlining some of the challenges that come with this particular environment that we're in, right? And so some of the benefits in terms of, from a business perspective, is clearly it hits your profitability, right? So, and there is a lot of research to actually kind of connect these two dots together. So when you have a more inclusive environment, there are less barriers to progress, meaning you have better products. You probably get to market faster. You probably provide a service in a better fashion, and you're likely in a more highly innovative environment, right? Because it's a much more inclusive of the different perspectives that make our services and our spaces and our experiences better. You also become, as a business, more highly effective, right? When you reduce barriers to getting to the best product or service, clearly your effectiveness in terms of reducing those barriers, you just become a lot more effective and efficient. And then culture. So there's a lot of talk about culture. I joke, because I've been doing workplace for so long, that everybody's a workplace expert now. 20 years ago, I remember some of my friends in the hospitality sector saying, I don't know why you want to go into workplace. But actually now we've really had to figure out, the place of the workplace and the purpose of the workplace as it pertains to our professional and personal lives. But the culture piece is such a crucial component. And when you have greater trust amongst colleagues, where everyone feels valued, where it's just more enjoyable to be there, and employees are more engaged, again, you could clearly outline that as a clear business benefit. And we pulled some slides to kind of support some of this, pulled some stats, I should say, to support some of this as well. So Ian's going to dive into that.
Right. And it's our goal today to sort of simplify the approaches to this conversation. We know that, the issues of inequity are challenging at times to speak of, because they unearth, issues that we have to grapple with individually. That is definitely a part of this work that is necessary to do. We encourage that open dialogue based on trust and honesty is the way that you approach those conversations without judgment or ridicule. But we also definitely need to focus that there are real benefits that have been chronicled, they've been studied, that impact business when you approach your business in a more inclusive and equitable mindset. And so a couple of studies here really found that the reason why diversity is so important to business is that companies with teams that are more diverse, they actually perform 3 times better than teams that are not. They are 6 times more innovative in terms of their service delivery and how they are engaging with their end users. And they are 8 times more successful at achieving their business outcomes. And so diversity is not just a good sort of human approach to interacting with each other, but it really does make for better business.
That's right.
All right.
And we're going to jump into some of the, let's kind of, again, grounding ourselves in the same understanding. So what is tokenism? What is diversity? What's representation? And I think by virtue of kind of defining this, we're going to talk about inclusion. So in the next slide, we kind of pulled just some of the textbook definitions, and again, pertaining to workplace, but we want to make it a little bit more real. And I have to be honest, some of these are actually grounded in stories that we have heard from other folks that are within our own industry, or maybe perhaps, grounded in some of the research that we've done. So I want you to kind of try to think about this in a more kind of personal way, right? So when I think about tokenism, textbook definition: the practice of making only symbolic efforts to recruit or promote a small number of people from underrepresented groups. And the reason why is in order to give the appearance of equity and equality within the workplace. So if I were to put that in other words, you're promoting a select few to be perceived as being inclusive when actually you aren't committing or committed to having equitable outcomes. So it's kind of like a what looks better on paper versus what's actually better from a social and business perspective. And it's really about intentions, right? And commitment. Are you committed with intention? How committed are you? So for example, there may be a board, right? Or a leadership group or a management group. And there's only one person that's hired to represent, even though there are many qualified candidates, there's only one person that's hired to represent all minorities, right? And their voices. So for example, again, if I look at, whether it could be a board of any business or upper management, right? And so there's the one token representative, and sometimes that person is actually referred to on all issues that have to do with marginalized groups, which is crazy. So if you're the only woman on a board or a management team that is all men, you shouldn't have to be the point of reference for everything that comes up that has to do with female employees. Or for example, and I think this one rings true, I believe this rings true, is when you have committee work, sometimes, number one, that committee work, the people who are burdened, and it really is a burden because it's a side of desk job that you're doing on top of your actual job. Sometimes organizations select people to form that committee or allow people to form that committee to combat the inequality, but those people are not actually experts or able to influence the outcome, right? And so they become the face, right? The face of inclusion, but actually they're not empowered or heard. So sometimes they don't even have a voice, right? It's kind of like, let them, if they want to have their own committee, and then let them talk amongst themselves, but actually that work doesn't influence some of the key decisions. And really the real power still remains with those who appointed them. So it's kind of a tick the box exercise. And that is a perfect example of tokenism. And it doesn't mean that, and I want to clarify about intention, it doesn't mean that the intention isn't a good intention. Sometimes for like firms or businesses or even sole proprietors, like you really want to figure out how you're going to be more inclusive, or, improve diversity amongst your employees. But there may be a lack of funding or a lack of commitment. And the one thing I always say this is, the one thing people can commit is their time. Mentorship is free. You can commit your time to really help to nurture some of the upcoming talent, to make sure that if you can't find the right talent, why is that, from diverse groups? Why is that? There might be a particular reason why, and it takes time to actually understand what the root causes of the issues are, and then figure out a plan to address it. But if it's a matter of, well, we've got the one Indigenous person on the board, or, there's a people manager, and that person is one of 1% of, an organization, well, how much influence can they actually have in terms of the outcome? And then also, does that create an environment where there is affinity bias, right? Where, you have people who are sort of supporting or supplementing ideas only because they have the same views, or that their variety of experiences is different, right? So I've spent a lot of time on tokenism because I think it's a really important component. And I think tokenism in some cases is intentional, in many cases is unintentional. But the idea is if you can actually if you actually have a clear understanding of how this kind of manifests in real life, then it's easier to pinpoint it, and sort of course correct. And then when it comes to diversity, so again, we've done the textbook definition. So, it's including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different gender, sexual orientations. So again, if I have a diverse population, no matter where people come from, a diverse employee base, I should say, no matter where people come from or what they believe, then you're able to, that means people are getting their foot in the door, no matter what your background is, no matter where you're from. And it's really merit-based and based on your actual qualifications, right? No glass ceilings, ideally. Once you've got your foot in the door, you're able to navigate based on, again, your qualifications. Sometimes you have a very diverse employee group, but the challenge is that there is a glass ceiling. And sometimes or you don't have a very diverse employee group. And it could be that the structure that's in place, the filter to get people's foot through that door is down to one person with their own biases, one person with their own perspectives. And so you see a lot of kind of talented people that are actually not able to cross over that threshold, even though they may be qualified, right? And so again, it's one thing to be to have a diverse group of people working within your organization with diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, but it's another thing to then include those people in and enable them and empower them to actually influence the outcome, right? And that really boils down to the question of culture, right? If the culture of your business is that you welcome everyone and truly everyone to participate, then that means that people are empowered to not only share their opinions and their perspectives, but again, also be able to influence the outcome equitably. So sorry, Ian, I think you wanted to jump in there.
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Oh, all right.
No, this is good.
Right. And representation, I've kind of combined it into the definition of diversity. I probably shouldn't have done that, but in terms of representation, it's the idea that it applies to all employees, right? So you might have a diverse group of employees, different races, religions, ages, genders, ethnicities, but that they're not limited to a particular level, right? They're not limited to being only individual contributors, right? They're also in leadership positions and, again, board seats and executive roles. All qualified people. They're not getting a step ahead because they happen to be from a minority group. Mm-hmm. It's actually to do with them actually having an equal ability to get their foot in the door and to also achieve to the same degree that others may achieve as well, right? So, and I think like the whole idea about all of this is that if you're free to be yourself at work, you can worry less about your relationships with your teammates, right? And it kind of fosters, again, a much stronger culture. And so when we talk about social benefits versus business benefits, in this case, we're talking business, right? That social fabric outside of the office, outside of work, that is a similar thing within the office, right? So, and it also helps people gain confidence and focus on the actual role than the politics that might be might be occurring because of a lack of equity. All right. And one thing I just wanted to point out is you could have, there's a study in McKinsey's, right? And it was a study of 1,000 companies. It was across 15 countries. And there were only 8% of those companies, 1,000 companies, only 8% of executive team members at those companies were female, right? And of those women, there was no ethnic minority representation whatsoever. So that is an example of very minimal representation and zero diversity, right? Minimal representation. So you have women in those seats. It's only 8%. So that's why it's minimal, but zero diversity. None of them were from different backgrounds, right? So that I just wanted to kind of try to, point that out in terms of the intersectionality as well. So we're going to launch. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ian.
No, we're going to move forward to the next slide.
Yeah.
So what is in it for you? It's not a selfish question. I think is the most appropriate question at this point in time in discussing the issues around equity and diversity, because we need to understand how this work relates to us and how it relates to the work that we're doing and the brands that we're representing. Whether it's a company, your own company, we have to be sure that we are being strategic about the conversation. And so we want to share a little bit more of what's in it for you as you engage in this process, or the potential for you in engaging in this process. So next slide. And so we want to give you a really quick visual on sort of what this work can do for your organizations, for your companies. We know through a plethora of studies, data points that we've collected, that 22% of companies that are engaging in active equity strategies have more engaged employees, which make their companies 22% more profitable. And so there's a direct dotted line between equity work and profitability in companies. And so these are real benefits that are available to you, to your organizations. From this standpoint, understanding and knowing that the engagement piece has to produce something of value. And we talked a little before, there is the social benefit, but we also want to really focus for you principals and owners and practitioners that there are very clear business benefits as well. And so this 22% represents better products, and the product that you're delivering to your client can be more diverse, more innovative. Studies show there's a Harvard Business Review study that showed that companies with more women actually are more innovative in their marketplace. That's a clear business case right there. And again, this idea of fostering a company culture that is based on belonging pushes profitability, because you have teams that are super engaged in the work. So 36% as well are more, these companies are overall more profitable. And this really is a direct correlation to their service offerings. So we're seeing this profitability coming through by means of outperforming other companies, companies that are higher in diversity and in representation, as Yasmien just explained, are actually outperforming companies that are not. And they also have a stronger engagement with underrepresented groups, which represent untapped markets. So we just want to, again, just hone in on the fact that there are literally opportunities for you as business owners in this work to drive profitability within your companies. And then lastly, and we know that right now we are having a pretty significant challenge in our industry. Companies that are engaging in active equity strategies are experiencing 50% less turnover in staff. And I think we know as practitioners what that means to our bottom line in terms of training individuals, in terms of retaining knowledge that is shared with our systems and our processes. This is an extreme case where this really offers a financial benefit to companies. And so this lower risk really does improve upon internal company culture, as well as, so those, just as a side note, those that are not engaging in this work, there was a study produced by Better Up that chronicled that employees are 4 times more likely to leave the company within 6 months. And so that engagement piece really falls right off the cliff. And so this all equates to better business, which really is a better company, which is a model that builds for everyone. We need to be adjusting and shifting our thinking, because there are opportunities that we have on the table that this work affords us.
Yep. And if there's one thing you take away from the session, it's a service model that builds for everyone with everyone,
Right.
right? It's the way I remember it. So for everyone and with everyone. And what we've done is we wanted to also talk about the risks of exclusion, right? So
Yes.
what are some of the industry risks? What are some of the business risks? And we want to talk about personal risks too. And it's interesting, as we were pulling this presentation together, we actually noticed some like a correlation amongst the three of them. So think about it as the scale going from very big, so big industry, into business, into personal, right? And one consistent theme amongst all three of them is obsolescence, right? So we don't want our business to become obsolete, right? We don't want our industry to become obsolete, and we definitely, from a personal and professional perspective, don't want to be obsolete, right? In terms of our perspectives. And so, one of the things about the industry risks is, you might, as Ian mentioned earlier, is, we've got this big reassessment, and I personally have never seen this much movement and this many designers either exiting the industry or finding different alternatives, right? And so we've got this talent issue where either talent is not engaging or talent is not participating in this industry, right? So and even if they are, then we could absolutely expand in terms of how much engagement is occurring, especially with talent that's just exiting college and trying to enter the workplace.
Right.
And so, that means that you have, less innovation. These are some, in terms of how we evolve our industry, obviously, ideas are what matter, right? It's kind of part of the amazing thing. Obviously I work for a bank, so I was talking to someone about the difference between how we work, my team works, and how, some of the financial folks work. And, a lot of how we evolve is, it's kind of not hierarchical, right? We're sitting in a room with a round table, and the best idea wins. It doesn't matter if you're entry level or, you've been in the industry for 30 years. It's the ideas and the experiences that we're creating. And so if you have talent that's actually choosing not to engage, then that means that, we're not evolving our industry or innovating as much as we can. And then you also have this kind of exclusion, right? So if there is no lane that accommodates Black designers, or if Black designers, I'm using Black designers as one example. If Black designers feel like, you know what, we tried to participate, but we don't see any representation in terms of the people that are, running the associations or organizations, or people that are, within particular businesses, then they're going to carve out their own lane, right? Because everyone wants their voice to be heard. And if there's one thing that is, we obviously, we're here, we love this industry, and we want to make sure that we're actually consolidating all of our education, all of our innovation, all of our thinking to, again, focus on making this industry better, right? So more of a unifying approach. And relevance, right? So how relevant, how if we shift our thinking, or we delay in terms of this adoption of diversity, equity, and inclusion as part and parcel of what our industry is about, especially interior design. Like, I personally chose this particular path because it had such an impact on the quality of life, right? Well, obviously we need our industry to not only our industry only gets better when you start to factor for all of these different perspectives, right? So yeah. So and when you think about business, it's again quite similar, right? So
Right.
you don't.
We can advance the slides there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. We probably have to move forward on the slides,
Right.
right? Business, you're leaving money on the table, and we kind of touched on this earlier. Whether you're creating a product or or you provide a service, at the end of the day, number one, your clients are expecting more, right? And your clients expect, in many cases, that you understand their needs and anticipate their needs before they even tell you their needs. And I think that there's enough again, enough research, and we see it probably day in and day out. If it's going to take you 3 or 4 times to actually understand, why women have a different need, or that perspective of someone coming from the indigenous community, because you don't have someone on your team that can actually speak to that, then again, you're either leaving money on the table, you're probably causing friction points where you possibly don't need to. But it's also about this imbalance of recognition. So sometimes you do have a diverse workforce, but the level of recognition tends to differ. And this is something that I would argue is quite measurable, right? And we're going to get into some of those tactical pieces. But again, intentionally or unintentionally, it could be that some groups are recognized sooner and faster and more than other groups. And so it's fairly, I think it's fairly, there are some data points clearly that one could pull on if you're running a business.
There's one other point, Yaz, that I wanted to add to this piece, is that I'd like to say that there are no longer any lamp-lighters. There was a time in history where that was a job, where someone would go around and light street posts. That job became obsolete. And so if we're not recognizing that there are a group of disruptors that understand the impactfulness to business that equity brings, if we're not allowing ourselves to participate in meaningful ways, then those disruptors will take our place within the industry.
Yep.
And we know that we already are challenged with various entities, whether it's project managers, engineers at times, large conglomerates, multinationals that are doing turnkey design, like not to pick on any one company, but the JLL of the worlds. And they are much more adept at really applying these strategic foresights from an equity standpoint that really is beginning to enrich their service offerings. And so we as leaders in this space have to consider what we can do as sort of, again, gatekeepers of this great industry to make sure that we are ourselves evolving to provide the best services and products for our clients.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. And tunnel vision, right? So, whether it's a business or professionally or personally, when you have tunnel vision, you've got a blind spot. And those blind spots are things that others can capitalize on. So Ian just mentioned, right? So when your service and product model, like product delivery model, likely needs to diversify, right? It's just the pace that things move nowadays, right? We are evolving very rapidly, but the risk of tunnel vision is a very high risk. And so there are many folks that, think that this DEI is maybe a passing thing, or it's not. I think it's here to stay. I think we've seen that. I think that that the challenge with having tunnel vision is you create this kind of exclusive club, but also an exclusive view. So your viewpoint is not diverse enough. And so, there's lots of literature. I probably read too much because I mentioned reading all the time, but there's a lot of literature that talks about presidents and how sometimes they are surrounded by yes people, right? And so if you're scratching your head wondering, like, how is the world upside down right now, right? Especially what we're seeing now. Well, you know what? When you're surrounded by yes people who have the same bias as you, then again, you have tunnel vision, but your clients are expecting more, right? And so you're unable to capture that particular share of the market, right? So,
even if they're not expecting more, it's incumbent upon us as the thought leaders in this space, as the practitioners and the problem solvers, to show them what they don't know and why it's better. That's part of our service offering that distinguishes us in this industry. And I just wanted to sort of interject that because I think that is the strength of our community.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree. And sometimes when you are a part of when you have needs, so as we go back to that the idea of employees, often if you haven't factored for spaces, or let's use spaces as an example, for employees to be their most authentic self, right? Let's say an employee has a need. They are not going to want, they shouldn't have to raise their hand and say, hey, there's no space for me to X or Y, right? It's our job as leaders to make sure that we're thinking, as Ian said, right? We're thinking we're ahead of the curve, right? Whether people are asking for it or not, because sometimes some voices are silenced, or people may feel uncomfortable about actually, speaking to their needs. And when it comes to personal risks, so again, here's the same thread of obsolescence. Personally, if you exclude yourself from learning, right, then you're going to limit your own individual growth. And we've seen a lot of people with a very public image suffer from some reputational risk, that reputational risk that could have been avoided, right? Or be asked about issues that they should be able to speak to, right? And not be able to speak to them from an educated viewpoint, right? Because they've kind of thought this is a passing thing. So yeah. I mean, Ian, you own your own business, so maybe the idea of personal brand, right, is a critical one.
Well, someone once told me that, as a business owner, you are representing your business, even if you're getting ice cream at the grocery store. And so you have to be very mindful of how you are presenting your ideas, the work that you're doing in a manner that's beneficial. And I think for us, if we as an industry are not going to be really integrated into this work in a way that's meaningful to the work that you're doing, I want to be clear about this. Equity work is not one size that fits all. You have to, through your own experiences, through your own sort of ideas and brand placement, have to understand what that means for your brand so that it is authentic. This work needs to be authentic, and it needs to be strategic. And so I think those are important elements to this idea of the personal risk. If we're not engaging as thought leaders in this intentionality around this work, it is at a personal risk to ourselves.
Yep. It's all about credibility.
Absolutely. And so I know we're coming close to time. We want to give you some really sort of high level considerations as leaders to adopt and to focus as you leave this conversation and meet with your teams and your other collaborators, that you can really hone in on some approaches to delving into this work and seeing how it can be integrated with your businesses, with your own personal equity journeys. It's important to have a starting place. And so for us, it's to ensure that you are exercising your power. I understand we have conversations with many folks, and at times, if you feel like you are within the privileged group that everyone seems to be shining a spotlight on, saying that this is all your fault, I want you to know that that is not the case. That is a bit of rhetoric that is supported really by just where we are in our current age of communicating. We need to sort of cut through some of that noise and really focus on what you can do as a leader meaningfully within your organizations. And so what we want to do is to focus you squarely on your business. And so we're going to start with sort of those 5 key areas of business. And so it's first thinking about equity in terms of value creation, marketing, value delivery, your sales, and financial impact. Okay. And so we're going to run through these slides fairly quickly, I think, because we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions and engage for a moment. Where you start looking for your value creation as it relates to equity is definitely your talent. Understand who they are. If they're not there, find out why they're not, or what's been missing. Perhaps you haven't been engaging with other communities that could offer you an in with particular groups, but you also, once you understand and identify the talent that you need, you have to make sure that you have clear ways of ensuring that there is a path for elevation, that you offer belonging and value, and that this is all based on trust and transparency, which leads to a trajectory that you and your employees understand that you are actually working together to move in a positive manner and to land at a positive outcome. Okay, this is extremely important. You're not going to win many folks with just wanting to produce work. We know that there's a shift happening in our industry, and we have to be at the forefront of it. We are more than just producers of work. We are really, again, producing and we like to say it at Lycanthropy, every space that we create is life is happening in it. We have a great impact on all communities that we're working in. And so talent is the first thing for value creation. Partnerships are extremely important. If you're not connected, find places to connect, people to connect to, organizations, other consultants who you can collaborate with, even if diversity isn't represented right now within your companies and firm. Partner with other groups to maybe charrette some ideas, understand how you want to attack a particular design problem. There are solutions that you can do in the immediacy to help jumpstart this representation within the work that you're doing. Get connected to educational institutions and community groups to help start understanding and create opportunities for dialogue. Systems are extremely important, especially when you're looking at your HR and hiring practices. We need to take a look at how those practices are really helping to support the ideas of equity and representation. Compensation is huge. We have to understand that is actually cross-generational, because compensation is connected to value, and it's not always just about money. So we have to be mindful of how you are compensating employees and collaborators holistically. Also, distinguish your growth and your opportunities that you offer as an entity to those who you are looking to join your organization. And always take a look, are your processes inclusive? Is your manner of working and the products that you're producing, are they inclusive and equitable? Okay, that's your value creation focus. When you're looking at, can we go to the next slide? Marketing is extremely important. You got to look at your leadership. You have to ensure that you're defining pathways to leadership. You have to make sure that you're sponsoring those who you identify as the next leader, and think of ways of how you can recognize them authentically within your organization. We have to make sure that our communications are enabling us to show what we are doing within the equity space, tell stories of engagement with equity strategies, thinking, and approaches. You as practitioners have to initiate and distinguish how this work is important and meaningful to your brands and to the work that you are actually producing. And then you have to message insightfully, use inclusive language, use culturally appropriate language, so that you are speaking universally, in a sense, to your marketplace. And then engagement is key. You need to create a measurable equity strategy. I can't tell you how important it is that you understand where you are today, where you want to be, and how you're going to get there. It has to be strategic. Activate learning opportunities within your organization, within your groups, and definitely share these experiences so that you're getting a good sort of basis of feedback and interaction along your equity journey. Okay, next slide. Sales is important. Sales represent, for me, accountabilities. Your sales need to be informed, understand the perspectives of those who you're selling to. They need to be inclusive, understand who your end clients, what their needs are. And please be intentional about the opportunities that you are selling with your product. It's more, again, than just delivering finishes and fabrics and all of those sort of tangible things that are connected with design, but you are designing opportunities for better. This is really, again, the power of our community. Okay, let your sales really represent the insights that you have gained. So audit your product. You should be auditing your design work to make sure that you've addressed some of the equity issues that we know that persist in some of our industry offerings. We need to catch those things and we need to correct them, right? Bridge
Yeah.
gaps.
And just one thing about this auditing thing, it doesn't have to be if you are designing something for the Asian community and you happen to not have any Asian designers in-house, you know what? If you've got anyone from that community that works in your office, it could be the accountant, it could be the IT person, it doesn't matter. Bring them to the table because, again, they will start to uncover some of those blind spots for you, and also get educated because you should be able to do that for yourself. But it doesn't, I think, because part of that auditing process, if you're doing it with, again, the same people around the table, we might all think, you know what, hey, this is a great idea. And then it hits the market, or, we hit the client and the client's like, you guys are out of your mind. So, bring in as many perspectives as you can. And especially when you're working with the communities, I can't explain how many times people have said, well, we went in and they hated it. And it's like, well, did you talk to anyone that was actually impacted by this from that community? And no, we didn't. Oh, that, we probably should have done that. Right. So just wanted to jump in there. Sorry, Ian. Jump in.
No, not at all. That definitely enriches the conversation. The last part of this piece was the innovations. Focus on how you can innovate what you're doing and target pioneering. It is okay. I'm not saying everything within your business needs to be different or you need to start again or make it very distinct from what it was before, but where can you pioneer change that really enables you to offer something that's unique and different? Diversify your problem solving, look at it from different ways and different perspectives. And then as well, conduct needs assessments so that you understand how you are actually delivering upon the needs that you've identified. Your sales should be solving for a need in a unique way. Okay, next slide. We're going to go through these quickly. Your value delivery should be squarely focused on your culture. Define what good looks like. Benchmark good in a way that is meaningful for you and your organization. Redefine your services and redefine what success and failure looks like for your organization through this equity lens. It's extremely important. Collaborators, we talked about a bit before. Cross-pollinate interactions purposefully. Make it meaningful. Go out of your way to break out of the sort of mundane approach in doing things the same way. Establish goals and dismantle all assumptive processes. You want to make decisions that are informed. And then lastly, create activations with your service delivery so that you're engaging community, you're advocating and using your influence for change. And again, supporting this idea of assessing needs. These should all be focused around meeting needs uniquely. And then lastly, before we wrap, this is all about the money. This is all about financing. You have to understand, we have to understand, as practitioners, we have an ecosystem of equity that we are actually feeding into. From our vendors to our collaborators, we have a lot of economic impact. And so you want to make sure that you are defining how you're procuring, how you're sourcing, how you're collaborating inclusively to make sure that you are impacting businesses and the communities in which you are serving in really in a positive and targeted manner. Measure the data. We have to get better as an industry in leveraging our technology so that we understand what is working. Yaz brought a great point in Marie Kondo your business. Outline your principles. You have to think about your candidates, your community engagement, your mentorship, advocacy, all of these elements we need to really look at and measure the data that's connected to these elements. And then lastly, define sustainable strategies. Sustainable in the sense is for your business, for your brand. Can your approaches sustain the strategies that you want to instill and integrate? Be specific. You got to be effective and make sure that it's connected to something that is meaningful with how you go about producing your work. Okay?
All right. 2:59, but we did start a few minutes late, so
We did.
Yeah. So we want to give everybody. I'm happy to stay on, Ian. I don't know what your time looks like.
I can as well if there's a little more time.
Yeah.
Sharon, maybe you can advise a little better on how much wiggle room we have.
We definitely can. We can put 10 minutes aside for questions. I think we're good. I'm just checking out the chat box right now. And again, just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions, to please pop them in the Q&A portion of the chat box, just so that we can see them.
No questions. It was flawless. I agree. I completely agree. No.
I do have to say, while we're waiting, I really appreciated how you kind of opened up the session with a better understanding of that, representation versus tokenism versus diversity, because I feel like a lot of us sometimes get stuck in, which is it that we could be either accidentally stepping into, and I refer to that tokenism piece, right? There could be really great intentions, but we're not entirely aware that the intentions aren't really hitting the right mark, or that there are things we're not considering. So personally, I really appreciated that, because I find we get to sometimes get confused on those pieces.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, for whatever reason, I can see that there are 20. Oh, here it is, general chat. I found my way. So I'm just taking a look at the chat to see if there are any questions. A lot of great comments, of course. I don't see any specific question. Oh, here's one in the Q&A now. Maria is stating it was flawless, but how would you properly ask a specific employee for assistance without making it a token situation? Great question.
Great question. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I can start that, Ian, if you like. I think sometimes part of the challenges, and this is my own experience that and what I know is of speaking to others. I think sometimes people feel that they don't want to have the like an awkward conversation, and I think that's why Ian started the last section with saying there's a lot of rhetoric out there, and it's kind of dialing up the tone, and we kind of just have to bring it back, right? And we are all going to make a mistake along the way, all of us, right? But I think you're going to have to find the courage, and I don't know how else to say it, but to find the courage to have open dialogue. And part of that actually links back to culture, right? So I don't know that it links necessarily to hierarchy. I suspect that could be it. But again, that's my own perspective is, if there's no one that I feel like I relate to, or someone, or a safe space, or even with HR, sometimes these HR, even in a lot of the design firms actually in this market, it's like one person that has that perspective. There's no kind of open dialogue that's permitted. It links back to the culture of the organization or the business. So it's interesting because we said earlier in the presentation, often these committees are created, right? And then you become the face of diversity, right? But you may not be the expert. And what we meant by that is, don't lean only on your internal employees. Like, commitment actually requires funding and time and engagement. And sometimes these committees are solely made up of the people that are actually affected by some of the injustices that occur, right? And that means that it's kind of a bit of an echo chamber. So part of allowing people, or not allowing, giving people the space and the comfort level is you actually being engaged, whether if there are committees, you being engaged, whether you're part of that committee or not, right? And that applies to us, to people from minority backgrounds as well, right? I can't only be focused on my particular piece, right? I have to be focused on equity in general. And so for me to actually understand and learn, I need to be as present as I am for issues that are affecting my own community, and be as present for issues that are affecting others, right? And so that's part of, I would say, being present. And that's what I meant about giving your time, your time is free, technically, right? That actually, it doesn't cost you anything other than your own time to actually participate. And that starts to create some of those bonds that allow people to feel more and more comfortable with addressing issues, or in this particular case, asking people to be part of this process is actually elevating them to the same level as others, right? And so I'd say to find the courage, but also a lot of the communication within your business needs to be about, we are welcoming all of your ideas. Your ideas are what make us great. It's not about hierarchy or who the design director is or who whatever. Like, you're here because we want to do great things together. And that's something that can't be a one-off. It has to be genuine. It has to be authentic, and it needs to be repeatable, right? Repeated consistently and visible in terms of your actions. And I'd say one other way that I personally measure the level of commitment is not only with the amount of time, who's in the room, right, when it matters, but also in terms of the commitments in terms of the actual community, right? So the perspective about how you engage with the community, and also in terms of, when we volunteer our time, whether you're mentoring, who are you mentoring? How are you coming across some of these candidates? Because on the flip side of it, often you hear, well, we tried the whole diversity thing, we couldn't find candidates. I am telling you, they're out there, right? But they're choosing not to participate, or they can't get their foot in the door, right? And so that's kind of a long answer, and I kind of covered more than what the question is. But I don't know, Ian, you probably have a lot of perspectives, but people often want to share their opinions and don't have a vehicle or a vessel to do so, or maybe feel like maybe I'm worried that, there might be some challenges with doing that. So.
No, yes, I would simply add, I mean, you have such wonderful insight. For me, it comes back to just getting back to our sense of humanness, to, the original question, really to avoid sort of that anxiety of, am I going to make a misstep, is just say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? I need some help to understand this. Can you help me? Or perhaps, can we have a conversation? I think sometimes what leaders do in error, quite honestly, is that they appoint others and say, hey, you lead this conversation, as opposed to, can we together, address this issue?
Yeah.
And so it's important for you as owners and as leaders to make sure that you're present to lead the approach to how we go about addressing some of these issues, and not leave it up to the committee to solve.
Yeah. What's most heartening is that people are finding their voice, right? And so we've seen that, right? I think it was the articles about Disney just last week. It's great that people are finding their voice, but they're doing it also at a great level of personal risk, right? And so that shouldn't necessarily be the case. And so I just think about, to me, culture is the single most important thing. And honestly, sometimes people are like, well, we'll just wait for them to solve it up there. And if they're not, if they're not worried about it, we're not going to worry about it. Well, you know what? There are some tangible things that can be done to actually kind of start to blur the boundaries a little bit. If there are walls or silos up in your organization or your business, you can start to kind of, I think, cement that social bond, right? But it takes active engagement by everyone involved, and that 100% includes leadership. It's not something for the employees to solve. It's absolutely the leaders that need to show up day in and day out and show their commitment in many ways. And time is just one of those ways.
Right.
We've got one more question, actually two more. Do you have any additional recommendations for smaller firms, maybe sole proprietor or up to possibly 5 employees, on how to address diversity when hiring?
Haha. Okay, Ian, do you want to go first or should we? Because I'll talk. This is my passion. So
well, this is definitely your focus, and they need to hear from the expert on this issue. That's you.
You know, it's quite interesting that I mention HR or the person who is hiring, the hiring manager, because often, again, in a lot of small and large firms, it boils down to one person, right? And there's a version of like, well, the candidate will find me, right? But actually, I mentor a lot of people, and it's actually, LinkedIn has been one of the most amazing things, and things like LinkedIn have been the most amazing things because they actually remove HR altogether out of the picture. It allows you a direct line to the people that are hiring. And it also allows you to have a lot of information about what, the opportunities that might exist. But I do find that it's interesting, especially for people who are looking for entry-level talent, that one, there are many institutions, educational institutions, that have chosen particular paths in terms of how inclusive or how much they want to focus on this particular piece, and also what influences there are in terms of the curriculum. I think that students specifically, are being very, very careful about where they're spending their money. So if I'm choosing between one university and another, they are looking at the curriculum to see, again, if it's representative of what they might want to learn about and where they see their career going. So if you kind of partner up with some of those institutions, I think that's one piece. But also, there's a lot of talent that is out there that's looking for more engagement, and perhaps, again, a bit nervous about opening up that door, right? It's always harder for the fish to swim upstream, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be present where it matters. So there are also talent recruitment companies that are out there that also help that are very specific, right, about inclusive hiring. So they actually seek out candidates that are from diverse backgrounds, and so that also helps you. But I just think the in terms of how engaged you are, right, and who actually gets to make the decision and what resumes make it through the door, you got to figure out. If you're a small business, you could also partner up, I would say, right? There's a lot of, actually, Ian, your business is very focused on equity, right? But you could also partner up with some folks. It doesn't mean that you have to hire someone to a large firm. Ask around, use your network. The network is such a huge, valuable piece in terms of finding the right candidates. I basically, anyone that I know, anyone that I am mentoring, I am sending out that I'm helping them prep their resumes, and I'm sending it out to literally everyone I know that I know is going to give that person a really good experience. It's going to actually be committed, right? It's not a tick the box type of thing. It's like, let's find the right fit, a place where you're going to thrive, right? And so that network is really critical.
And it is interesting that there are some firms that we've had discussion with that are no longer looking at portfolios or the traditional resume. They're simply starting with having a conversation and understanding how the potential collaborator thinks. What are their interests? Where are their skill sets? How are they fitting in with perhaps a problem that the company's trying to solve from an organizational standpoint? So it doesn't always have to come through the traditional sense of show me your portfolio or show me your resume. I say show me your humanity, because you're going to get the best work out of an individual that is plugged into how they can use their skill to improve your organization and the work that you're doing for your clients.
Yeah, there's also, I want to mention, not BIDA specifically, but there are also associations that are specifically, again, we talk about carving out a separate lane, but it's specifically to represent people within the industry who are of a specific background. Now that you can, there's a lot of different places where you can seek out advice, right? Or people from different experiences, but keep the door open, I think, is the key to this, and find the courage. It can't be swimming upstream all the time. So, yeah.
And I think one of the things we've been discussing internally at ARIDO is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. There's both, as you mentioned earlier, Yasmien, both sides may be uncomfortable, but that's okay. It's having that bravery to be able to have that conversation or take the first steps is the most important piece.
Yeah.
We've got one question left, and then maybe we can wrap up.
Sharon, sorry, I just want to add one other thing is don't discount the effect that having a diverse set of management has. So I have a lot of people that reach out to me like I'm a unicorn. I wish I wasn't a unicorn, but at this particular stage, I am, right? And they reach out to me because I'm in a position of influence where I can actually influence the outcome. That shouldn't be the case. And I think that you want to have people who want to work in with your business or in your business, right? And that's about all the steps that you take to, as Ian said, like communicating about how engaged you are, but also be authentically engaged, whether it's at an individual level or with other communities or artists or however, we're all from different backgrounds in terms of our experience and what our business what our business is in. So, don't forget that has a huge impact when people see a representation, a woman, a person from a Black person, an Indigenous person, whoever, amongst your management team or your board. It has a giant influence in terms of how comfortable they may be in terms of how motivated they are to become part of to work with your business.
Right. No, that's great. I unfortunately, I actually have to run away right now. Forgive me, I'm getting some messages here, but I thank you all for participating in this conversation. The most encouraging thing is that you're here, involved and looking for ways to actually be a part of this conversation and this shift that needs to happen in our industry. So always, Sharon, ARIDO, thank you so much. Yasmien, you're amazing. I really appreciate the work that you all do, and just encourage all you practitioners to go get this, go do this work. It's meaningful.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll speak on behalf of Ian, Sharon. If there's one more question, I'm going to message it for you, Ian. Don't worry.
Thank you, Ian.
All the best, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Perfect, Yasmien. So the last question is, how do employees with a non-diverse company break down the glass ceiling barrier or bring awareness to the company that it exists?
That's interesting. So one, the facts are on your side, right? So I find that you have to, I hate saying this, but you have to kind of gear the story in a way that the people who are receiving the story understand it, right? And we do this all the time. It's part of what we do, right? Figure out who your audience is and then make sure that you're telling a narrative that they're going to understand. And sometimes you're saying the same thing, but in a way that resonates with them. And that's why when we were talking through this, how we were going to talk about this, we were like, well, should we go down the social aspect or should we go down the business aspect? Well, it's kind of both, right? Depending on who's listening, there are benefits on both sides. And so we wanted to show that kind of balance. I think it's challenging, again, when you talk about swimming upstream, it is challenging to share your concerns. I think there's strength in numbers, though. I'd say that helps to bolster your confidence, my confidence, right? So numbers always help. I would not discount the idea that there may be many more people who are going through exactly what you, or seeing what you're seeing, going through what you're going through, or seeing what you're seeing. One way you could address it is, I find that HR, when it's really good, it's great, or the hiring, however the hiring works in your business. But I'd say put candidates forward. And if you start to see a pattern of behavior, or a pattern of a hiring pattern, let's say, that seems to be out of sync, then use the data to your benefit, right? Because I think sometimes people approach this as a almost like a qualitative discussion, right? Well, it's quantitative. Whether, if I own my own business, which I don't because I'm not like Ian and I'm not brave, but if I had my own business, I'm going to want to make sure that I don't have this pattern of like behavior that is possibly limiting my business's ability to expand and thrive, right? And so you kind of have to, that's why I said Marie Kondo, right? Is you kind of got to Marie Kondo your business every once in a while, right? So the same thing happens as if you're within an organization. It's very easy to say, well, you know what, I feel like X, Y, and Z is happening, versus saying, actually, you know what, I've put forward 10 female candidates and I've noticed that actually each and every single one wasn't hired. Is there a particular reason, right? Because they all seem to be qualified. It's challenging to have that discussion, but you know, I mentioned Disney because often when people bond together, right? And sometimes it's hard to have that conversation, but we kind of have to find the courage, right? Otherwise, we're all kind of, you know, is this festering energy, right, behind the scenes. And actually, it's probably something that could be addressed. In some cases, again, the intentions are not to exclude others, right? The intentions might be like, hey, you know what? We didn't even know this was an issue. I went through that in one particular business I worked at. I didn't even know this. My boss said, I didn't even know this was an issue. And now that I know it's an issue, then, you know, we can do something about it, you know, but be careful not to be, and I use the word burdened, but I hope this comes across the right way, not to be the person that's raising the issue and then assigned to solve it, right? We have to hold our leaders accountable. And I always, my perspective is, you know what? I'm the talent. I'm a get. It goes both ways. So as much as I want to work here, you also need me, right? I'm exactly the type of talent that you need. I'm qualified. I have a really good experience. I bring different ideas. And so if you want to retain me, then I need to know that my voice is heard. And the way that you can measure that is if you have a voice, but not a vote, or if you don't have a voice and you don't have a vote, or if you have a vote on the outcome, but the votes always seem to wind up with the same perspective. And by remaining in that particular place, you are actually almost, the way I look at it is I'm then contributing to the issue. I can take my talent somewhere else. And if that somewhere else doesn't exist, I'm going to create a lane for myself. But it's always better that we create the lane together. That lane just needs to get wider, right? And so hopefully we're not like elbows out trying to force it, right? Hopefully this is, you know, just a natural evolution of what our industry looks like and how we're thinking. Because again, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, it was about the unique thing about what we do is we really do improve the quality of life at a human scale. We really do breathe life into experiences. We create experiences. And so how can we be capable of doing that externally and not doing it from within, right? And Ian and I are like, you know, we're available. If anybody wants to talk, you can find us on LinkedIn. You know, we're happy to talk some more. It's not a finite thing where we have a finite solution. It's just ever changing and ever evolving, and hopefully, you know, moving towards the right path.
That's great, Yasmien. And I think your last comment ties really well into tomorrow's programming. There is a principals, partners, and owners town hall where owners who may be some of the participants today can get together and then have a conversation after listening to you and Ian today, actually start to think about in small intimate groups, okay, how can we do this? Where do we see we can make a difference? So I encourage for those principals, partners, and owners of firms that are on today's call and heard this, If you are participating in the PPO town hall tomorrow, that's your next step. You can be at a table with other owners and start to have some of these great conversations, because as you said, we want that lane to kind of grow. We want more people kind of coming on side and hopefully starting to make those steps gradually and making change within their own organization. So
next year, we're going to challenge you next year. One of you go in, Marie Kondo your business, and come back and honestly, really, come in and tell us what you've learned, and I think it's always good to have, like, I think the word allyship is kind of banded around, but it really needs to be people who are actually doing the work. And, we really encourage you and hopefully challenge you to come in and put yourself out there, because we definitely are. And thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both, you and Ian, for bringing together some fantastic information. I believe these kinds of informational pieces help to kind of demystify a little bit, because I feel for some people, they really don't know where to start. They don't know what to consider. So I feel like you've given them some really great groundwork to consider. And I love that you've included the action plan. So thank you so much for your participation. We are now going to take a break. We'll likely be on break for 20 minutes, and then the next session will start at 3:45. And thank you again, Yasmien. Great seeing you again.
Very much. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.